He sat at his desk, staring at his work with a mixture of frustration and doubt. The pages were scattered, some filled with incomplete attempts, others ruined by mistakes he couldn't ignore. Each stroke of the pen, each attempt at his craft, seemed inadequate, falling far short of the vision he held in his mind. He wanted to excel, to be exceptional, but every effort reminded him of his limitations. The feeling of mediocrity pressed down on him like a heavy weight, making each action more exhausting than the last. Doubts swirled in his mind. Maybe I'm not talented enough, maybe I'll never get it right. The more he tried, the heavier the burden of failure felt, until he could barely move without fear of making another mistake. It was in the midst of this frustration that a presence appeared, not in the room itself, but in the stillness of his mind. A samurai, tall and composed, emerged from the shadows of his imagination. The figure exuded calm mastery, carrying no fear, no hesitation, only the quiet authority of someone who had devoted a lifetime to honing their skill. His armor was simple, yet every line and curve of it conveyed balance, precision, and purpose. He held a katana sheathed, and in his hands, even the weight of restraint seemed deliberate. The young man felt a pang of awe. He realized that this figure embodied not just skill, but a philosophy, one that could transform his own scattered, frustrated attempts into purposeful, deliberate practice. The samurai did not speak. He simply gestured toward the scattered papers and then toward himself, demonstrating something profound. Mastery is born not from talent alone but from focused, deliberate effort repeated over time. The young man watched as the samurai slowly drew the katana, handling it with meticulous attention, each motion precise, deliberate, and measured. There was no rush, no need for speed or flamboyance. Every movement was intentional, practiced, and perfect in its focus. It became clear, excellence was not about innate ability, but about dedicating oneself fully to the process, paying attention to each small detail, and striving for improvement in every action. He hesitated, unsure if he could emulate such discipline. But as he observed the samurai, he noticed something else. The figure's expression was calm, almost serene. Mistakes did not seem to bother him. Errors were acknowledged, understood, and corrected through careful repetition. There was no panic, no despair, only the commitment to the practice itself. This realization struck him like a bolt of clarity. The burden of perfection, the fear of failure, had been paralyzing him. What the samurai showed was that mastery begins with patience, awareness, and a willingness to embrace the process rather than demand immediate perfection. Encouraged by this silent lesson, he picked up his own pen and returned to his work. This time, he focused not on the outcome, but on each stroke, each movement, each moment of attention. Mistakes appeared as before, but they no longer carried the same weight of failure. Instead, they became guides, small markers showing what needed refinement, what could be improved. He began to notice subtle details he had previously ignored, the way his hand moved, the way each line interacted with the other, the rhythm and flow of his actions. Each small adjustment was a step closer to mastery. The process itself became a teacher, and he began to understand the power of deliberate, attentive practice. Time seemed to stretch and bend as he worked. Minutes passed, then hours, but he was no longer weighed down by frustration. Each attempt, each repetition, built momentum and skill. The samurai watched approvingly, a silent mentor guiding him through the unspoken principles of mastery. Patience, focus, humility, and persistence. He realized that true excellence is not flashy or immediate, it is painstaking, methodical, and deeply intentional. There is no shortcut to mastery, only the commitment to continual improvement, one deliberate action at a time. By the end of the session, the young man felt a sense of quiet transformation. The frustration that had dominated him earlier had been replaced by focus and calm. The scattered papers no longer represented failure but steps in a journey of growth. The samurai remained, a steady reminder that mastery is cultivated through consistent, intentional practice and the courage to persist through mistakes and challenges. He understood now that to excel at anything, one must embrace the process, pay attention to every detail, and dedicate oneself fully to learning, repetition, and refinement. He leaned back, taking a deep breath, absorbing the lesson in full. The journey toward excellence was not about perfection from the start, but about commitment, focus, and the disciplined effort to improve consistently. The samurai, now slowly fading from his imagination, left him with a profound understanding. The art of doing anything exceptionally well is available to anyone willing to dedicate themselves to the practice, to honor each moment, and to approach their craft with the patient, deliberate attention of a true master. After his first moments of understanding, he realized that mastery could not be achieved through a single effort or occasional bursts of practice. Excellence demanded consistency, patience, and total focus on the process rather than immediate results. The samurai's presence lingered in his mind, calm and unwavering, a silent guide showing the path to truly exceptional performance. The young man began to see that skill was not a fixed trait but a living thing, shaped, refined, and sharpened through deliberate action repeated with attention and care. He returned to his craft with renewed intent, approaching each motion as if it carried weight beyond the immediate task. Each stroke, each step, each action was performed with mindfulness, conscious of every detail. The mistakes that had once caused frustration now became valuable feedback, guiding him to adjust and improve. The samurai's example had instilled in him a quiet patience, an understanding that every small refinement contributed to a larger arc of growth. It was a process of layering effort upon effort, repetition upon repetition, until skill became second nature and excellence emerged naturally from persistence and focus. Time passed unnoticed as he immersed himself in the practice. He was no longer concerned with the end result, nor with comparing himself to others. The only focus was the action in front of him, executed with intention and awareness. Each movement was measured, deliberate, and refined. The samurai's presence, silent but commanding, seemed to imbue each action with meaning, reminding him that mastery is born in the space between effort and attention, between repetition and reflection. The room, once chaotic and filled with uncertainty, became a space of calm concentration, reflecting the mental clarity and focus that had replaced his previous anxiety. He noticed subtle shifts in his abilities. Movements that once felt awkward now flowed with precision, tasks that had seemed insurmountable were now approached with confidence. The errors decreased not because he had suddenly gained perfection, but because he had learned to observe carefully, correct thoughtfully, and persist with determination. Each completed repetition strengthened his understanding, sharpening not only his skill but also his perception, his patience, and his confidence. The process itself became a teacher, and the path of mastery unfolded before him step by step, repetition by repetition. Hours passed in this disciplined focus, and yet the young man did not feel exhaustion. Instead, he experienced a quiet satisfaction, a sense of progress and growth that came from the deliberate attention he paid to each detail. The samurai, watching from the edges of his mind, seemed to radiate approval, a silent affirmation that true mastery is cultivated in the deliberate practice of small, intentional steps rather than in rushed or half-hearted attempts. Each movement became a meditation, each repetition a lesson, each adjustment a doorway to a higher level of skill and awareness. He began to understand the broader lesson: excellence is not accidental, nor is it the result of innate talent alone. It is the product of dedication, discipline, and a willingness to engage fully with the process, no matter how repetitive or challenging it may seem. The samurai's philosophy revealed that mastery is not a destination but a continuous journey. Every day presents the opportunity to refine, improve, and approach one's craft with more precision, awareness, and care. Skill is accumulated over time, shaped by intentional, repeated actions, and perfected through patience and reflection. By the afternoon, the young man could see tangible results of his dedication. Tasks that had once seemed impossible were now executed with confidence and fluidity. The mistakes that had previously filled him with frustration now appeared minor, easily corrected, and valuable in shaping his skill. His workspace reflected the clarity of his mind, neat, orderly, and purposeful. Each completed action was a step forward, a building block in the larger edifice of mastery. The samurai's presence, though fading, remained a quiet reminder that the path to excellence is guided not by shortcuts or luck but by deliberate, mindful practice every day. He leaned back, breathing deeply, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond the superficial satisfaction of completing a task. It was the deep fulfillment of knowing that he was learning, growing, and moving steadily toward true mastery. The process itself had transformed him, instilling patience, resilience, focus, and a sense of inner strength. He understood now that doing anything exceptionally well is not a matter of talent alone but of attitude, approach, and unwavering commitment to deliberate action. As evening fell, he felt a profound clarity settle over him. The lessons of the samurai were no longer abstract concepts but practical strategies for approaching life and craft. Mastery was achieved not by rushing, cutting corners, or waiting for inspiration, but by showing up consistently, focusing deeply, and refining each action with intention. Each day's practice, each repetition, each mindful correction brought him closer to excellence, reinforcing the truth that the art of doing anything exceptionally well is accessible to anyone willing to devote themselves fully to the process. By the time he set down his tools, the young man had experienced a quiet transformation. The room, the tasks, and the craft itself reflected a newfound order and precision. The chaos and frustration that had once defined his efforts had been replaced by calm, confidence, and skill nurtured through attention and persistence. The samurai's silent guidance lingered as a reminder: mastery is not a destination but a lifelong practice, and those who commit to it fully, with patience and focus, can achieve the extraordinary, one deliberate step at a time.